Can the Leafs exercise those demons and finally displace the Bruins from the postseason? Let's get into it on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, the daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morisuti. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I gotta admit, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic game Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. Dave, we're here. 82 games in the books. Game 83 of the season starts tomorrow. Leafs, Bruins. Can you feel the excitement, my friend?
I'll feel it once I throw up before the game, and then I'll definitely feel the excitement.
Yeah. There's gonna be a lot of nerves. I mean, obviously, we look back on the history between these two teams, and it's not pretty. You don't have to look that far. I mean, also, yes, there's 2013. It was 4-1, but then there was 2018. It was 2019, and even this year, the Leafs went. They lost all 4 meetings in the regular season against the Boston Bruins. But, Dave. None of that matters now because the postseason is a different beast. And, we've been told this team was built for more postseason success with the additions that were made at the trade deadline and obviously back in the summer with the Bertuzzis and Domis and Ryan Reeves of the world. So now it's time for Brad Living to put his money where his mouth is, and we'll see if it's true. If that type of toughness and grit will shine through, and we'll see if it ends up making a difference here as the Leafs look to beat the Bruins for the first time in a playoff series since what's the date there? 1959. So hopefully that does happen. We will preview the series throughout the show today, but we have a very special guest joining us for the first segment. So let's throw it to him now. It is my good friend, Jeff O'Neill, former NHLer, former Maple Leaf, and the co-host of Overdrive. Here's our conversation earlier today. Joining us now on the Locked On Leafs podcast, former NHLer, former Maple Leaf, and current TSN hockey analyst and co-host of Overdrive. It's my guy, the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill. What's going on, O? Thanks for doing this, pal.
Else, brother, no problem, buddy. Anytime, you know that.
So what's the routine going to look like for you Saturday night ahead of Game 1?
Saturday night, I will be doing yard work during the day, and I will be in the TSN Studio 6 for puck drop. And then it's sign of the cross, pray for not quadruple overtime, because that means you're spending a lot of time in there for a 3 to 4 minute hit. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Are you there the whole playoffs, every Leaf game?
Yeah, I mostly do, Leafs for Sports Center, and there's the panel with Dregs and James and usually Cheryl and a bunch of different other people. And it's work. I mean, it's not like you're just kicking your feet up. You got to,
right.
And the thing that gets crazy is it changes, right? It could be 3-1. One team's power play is the story of the game. And then all of a sudden in the last 3 minutes, there's a miraculous comeback or an unbelievable save or a stupid penalty, an egregious call. Something can totally flip in 3 minutes. And then Duthie's notes are all thrown in the garbage and you got to start from square one. So they're fun nights because they can just, they can take you on different paths. It's always fun.
Well, especially the playoffs, right? Like you never know what you're going to get. How do you think, things shaped up here in the final week of the season? Toronto now ends up playing Boston instead of Florida. Do you think that benefits the Leafs or are they worse off? Does it really matter to you? Like now that it's Leafs Bruins as opposed to Leafs Panthers, like where do you lean on that?
I think Al's brother, it's the same animal, isn't it? I mean, they're both kind of the boogeyman in their own respect where they play a grinding physical style and I honestly don't think there's any difference between either two of the teams. This is about what Toronto can do. And Pat Maroon summed it up best. He's like, this is where you see who's got it and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's been a lot discussed over the years. I know last year everyone thought this was going to be the group's last chance. I really believe it's the group's last chance. Like, if these guys can't figure out a way to win with separating them and putting them on different lines and having some depth, like, how could you possibly go back again and say, yeah, this is the right group moving forward? I mean, if this doesn't work out, we're talking one playoff series win in 8 years. Sorry, that's not going to fly anymore.
Well, it's going to be interesting that you bring that up. I was thinking about this earlier today and how often, I know we're going to talk about it on your show, but how often you'll end up talking about on OD if it's another first round exit and it's an ugly one from the big boys. You got one guy in particular who's looking to get his bag this summer, talking about Mitch Marner. I mean, how much pressure is going to be on this guy to perform in this playoffs, and how much do you think that's going to influence what happens with him in the summer?
I mean, there's external pressure because the people like you and I are talking about this right now, but he's just got to go out and work his ass off and try to be the best player on the ice. The preseason projections, when we do our top 50 list on TSN, Mitch Marner, I believe, is always ahead of Braden Point. I think for the most part he is. But I'll tell you what, Braden Point come playoff time, they're about the same size, skilled players. Braden Point always gets it done in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's not like he runs people over. He doesn't morph into Eric Lindros. He just does it. He gets to the front of the net. He scores big goals. He makes big plays. He makes big defensive stuff. He's a difference maker, and he's clutch, and he does all the right things at all the right times. That's what Mitch has got to do. It just can't be, it didn't work out for me this year. He's one of the most talented people in the world on the ice. He's a fabulous player. He can really make things happen. He just got to go out there and do it. They all got to do it. It's going to take all of them to do it. And going back to the Maroon comments, they got to get it done.
I completely agree. I mean, we look at the ghost of the past, and it's obvious that the big boys got to get it done. That's clearly a storyline that everyone's going to be tracking throughout the series. What other main storyline do you think you're gonna be tracking? Anything else that catches your eye ahead of the series that you'll be kind of keying in on?
I mean, goaltending, bro, is a massive factor, right? Boston's got two guys that are really good. And I don't even know if anybody knows what they got in their own net right now for the Maple Leafs. It's going to be one of those things where if it goes south goaltending wise, we're going to look at the situation and say, a lot like with a lot of other things we've done in the past, we've looked at it and said, how'd you think that was ever going to work? You know what I mean? With like an all-skill team, all 5'10", 5'11" defensemen. We've looked at that stuff in the past and said, how'd you ever think that was actually going to win? So if this goaltending falls flat on its face, we're going to look afterwards and say, you wanted to go with a guy that was in the minors on waivers and think that he was going to take you to the promised land? I mean, this guy could flip a switch and be dynamite, but I don't know. It's just difficult, and Brian always talks about it's difficult not to think of. That's no way to think of anything going into a playoff series. You want to be positive, but with past experiences, it's just tough to think of everything panning out and something great happening. I hope it does. I want to keep going into Studio 6 and doing the games and covering it for SportsCenter. But I've been going home after the first round for a long time. I got to the second last year, but it didn't last long.
No, it didn't last long at all. But when you talk about the goaltending, it's interesting because you talk about the up and down season that Samsonov had. Like, if I would have told you back in September when I got a text from you saying how the guy couldn't even put his equipment on anymore, he should be ashamed of himself, basically. The fact that he's morphed himself back into this team's number one goaltender, I think is, just a statement to how he's worked himself back into the picture. But that being said, there are those demons from earlier in the season. Like, how long of a leash do you think Samsonov has here before they start looking at Joseph Woll?
Seeing his past experiences and play on the ice where it kind of goes south, it goes south. I wouldn't wait very long. If it doesn't look right, I'm going to go with Joseph Woll, and I'm going to run with Joseph Woll. So I don't know. It's one of those things you just don't even want to be thinking about that. You want to think about quality goaltending performances Where after game one, regardless, win or lose, you're going to say our goalie gave us a chance to win, as opposed to saying we can't win with that goaltending. So that's all they're looking for after game one. Our goaltender gave us a chance in either our power play. I don't know. Let's just try to dream up a scenario where after game one, we're talking about a victory.
Yeah, it would be very nice to have that conversation. I mean, goaltending. The thing is, goaltending hasn't been the downfall for this Maple Leafs team over the course of the last few years in the playoffs. Surprisingly, when you think about the makeshift goaltending tandems that this team has put together over the last 3 years, but it's understandable how it clearly is going to be a massive storyline going into it. One thing that I'm kind of tracking is whether or not those new additions can actually make the difference that we were told they're going to make. You look at Bertuzzi, Max Domi, Ryan Reeves, like these guys were brought in specifically. It was to bring that snot, piss, and vinegar, and they'll be ready to go come playoff time. Like, how much will they factor into this series, you think, when it comes to what they can provide, knowing that this is the style of game that they're supposed to excel in?
They got to be big time players. I mean, it's going to take a village, and if you look at all the things, I did a thing for, the pregame show the other day, the top 5 X factors, complementary players were number 5. The worst case scenario is you got people that sit back and say, oh, this is Austin Matthews' problem, or this is Mitch Marner's problem. I just got to go out there and see what happens. You got to have everybody invested, whether it's Liljegren, Domi, Bertuzzi, Nyes, Yarncrook. Like, you got to go out there and play and score some big goals. You saw with Vegas and in Florida last year. Like, Vegas's fourth line won them some hockey games.
Yeah.
I think in some of their clinching games, Cassidy said our fourth line won us that hockey game. And you need games like that. Like, if you're going to go the distance and post 16 dubs, you need the coach after the game saying it was our goaltender, it was our power play, it was Eichel, it was the fourth line, it was Yarncroke, it was Matthews. It just can't be the same cast of characters every night. And that goes back to depth. And I think in years past, all we've said is, big boys didn't get it done. Well, nobody else did either. So you kind of need everybody going and have that kind of it all come together at the right time.
Well, I guess we'll get you out of here with this one. I mean, is this the year that they get through the big bad Bruins? Can we get a prediction from you? Leafs Bruins, how many games?
I think it's going to go 7 games and Toronto's going to win.
You got Toronto going through, exercising those. How does that happen, though? How are we going to sit there and after 7 games, sit there and talk about the Maple Leafs making it through, beating Boston? Like, what do you think that conversation will be like? What did the Maple Leafs do? What can they do to make that happen?
That conversation afterwards is going to be what I just talked about. Contributions from everybody. Their decor was physical. They contained, they put out fires, played well along the boards. Matthews was a stud. Marner or Nylander were studs. Tavares contributed. All the things have to go right for them. I mean, for the Leafs, it's like a championship. They're walking onto a championship golf course, and a championship golf course will expose your weaknesses. So if you're not dialed in at all levels, walking into a major, and the Leafs are on the first tee right now, something will expose your weakness will be exposed, whether it's putting, chipping, driving the golf ball, and it doesn't work out. So they need to hit on a lot of these things: goaltending, special teams, star players, complementary guys. If one of them is way off, they'll be exposed and it'll cost them. So they're one of those teams where they're not so deep and so good and so overpowering they can miss on one or two of those things. They've got to be firing on all of them if they want to win.
Well, we'll see. It all starts tomorrow. 8 o'clock puck drop down in the Garden. Leafs Bruins game 1 should be a fun series. Appreciate the time as always, O-Dog, and can't wait to see how it all unfolds. Thanks for your time.
Okay, Else, brother. Thanks, buddy.
Today's show is brought to you by Policy Genius. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace that saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help you through it. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one user or one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DeStefano and Dave Morisuti with you. We are a daily Maple Leaf centric podcast, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. You can find us on whichever platform you use to stream your podcast. You can also find us up on YouTube, where we've recently reached the 5K subscriber mark, and it allowed us to now do a giveaway of a Maple Leafs jersey. We're giving away an Austin Matthews jersey, so there's still time for you to subscribe to make yourself eligible to win the jersey, and we'll be giving that out throughout the throughout the playoffs here. So Leafs Bruins round 1. It's time for us to get down to business, Dave, with our little round 1 playoff preview. So game 1 set Saturday, April 20th, 4:20. Nice. 8 p.m. puck drop at TD Garden. How you feeling? Just how you feeling first and foremost about Leafs Bruins instead of Leafs Panthers?
Well, I mean, I just mistakenly on my part go back and looked at videos of past Leafs Bruins playoffs.
Oh no.
I didn't even go back to 2013, okay? I didn't even go there because I actually went to a Leaf Bruins playoff game. This was my first ever time going to watch a Leafs playoff game in person. So shelling out a lot of money to go and watch the Leafs lose to Bruins. This was in 2018. Yeah, because this was the year that they got Plekanec at the deadline.
Right.
God, those were some times.
What a deadline edition. Tomas Plekanec. Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was a second round pick they sent to Montreal too.
It was. I think they also got like Renat Valiev in the deal. But anyways.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I was looking back to that, and to me, I feel like this might not be the worst thing to happen to the Leafs, because I feel like last year they got over the round 1 hump, get over Tampa too after what happened the year before. And I don't think that this is happening again.
I don't think that could be understated. Like they got over the hump last year. Yes, they lost in round 2. It wasn't a massive leap from getting to the first to the second round, but they did get that monkey off the back and they won a round. So it's not like they have that pressure of we have to win a round here. I mean, obviously they do, just in terms of the grand scheme of what's considered success, for this whole season. Yes, of course they have to win a round, but it's not like it's weighing on them that they haven't done it yet, right? They've proven that they can put a team away. And they did that last year with Tampa. Now, can they do it this year with the Boston Bruins? I mean, I think they can. I think right now on FanDuel, the Bruins are favored slightly in this series. And I mean, it makes sense when you look at how things shook out in the regular season this year. I mean, you could look at obviously the playoffs past. I think the stats being thrown out there that the Leafs haven't beaten Boston in a playoff series since, what was it, 1959, I think? way long time ago. But if you look at this season, the recent success isn't great either. Boston won all 4 games, but the first couple of those games were really tight. Like, we're talking about a couple of games here that went to an overtime shootout, and then the last game 4-1 didn't look great. But the Leafs and Bruins do play each other pretty tight, and they always have, and that rivalry's there. But I look at the Maple Leafs, and I do kind of the whiteboard kind of thing, and I like what the Leafs are giving me this season compared to the Bruins. Like, why don't we take a peek at like the preview numbers for how the Maple Leafs fared this season, and then the team stats for the Boston Bruins, and kind of look at them side by side just to kind of show, how much better of a season I guess the Leafs had statistically. Yes, Boston had the better record, but statistically the Leafs were actually the better team. You look at the 5-on-5 expected goals, Toronto carried play 51.3% of the time. So they were the better team on the ice for almost, I guess, 51.3%. Boston just 50%. It was actually 50.05 was the actual number according to Natural Stat Trick. So, Boston, yes, they won a lot of games, and that's good for them. They didn't actually win the division. They kind of gave it away at the end. But in terms of controlling play, they were kind of a middle of the pack team in that regard, which is surprising to say about the Boston Bruins. But I think there's a lot of underlying numbers that kind of bode well for Toronto in this series. Slot shots and high scoring chances, like the Maple Leafs were one of the best teams. I know that Megan Chayk has talked about this a lot. She posted graphics the other day, which we showed on the podcast, about how the Maple Leafs were either first or second in pretty well all of the analytical high danger / scoring trends. And a lot of it was inside the slot, whether it's passes into the slot or slot shots. Bruins have not defended the middle of the ice very well this season. So I think that's a big reason as to why their expected goals numbers weren't great. They just got excellent goaltending from both Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman, which is why you look at the goals against per game. They only gave up 2.7 goals against per game compared to the Maple Leafs 3.18. So for sure, the edging goal is going to the Boston Bruins, but offensively, it most definitely, to me, is going to lean to the Maple Leafs. Like, yeah, you look at the easy stats, 3.63 goals per game compared to the Bruins, who had, just 3.21. But Toronto's got the far more superior offense. Outside of David Pastrnak, there's not, and I guess we could throw Marchand in there as well. Shouldn't discredit him. There's not a whole lot of other guys that necessarily scare me when it comes to Boston producing offense here. I don't know about you, but if you can take away those two, which obviously is incredibly difficult, there's not much else to the Bruins.
No, like for me, when I look at the Bruins, and I was listening, Claude Julien was on the Leaf Morning Report, Leaf Morning Take. Sorry,
Yep.
I don't know why.
Take.
Sorry, the Leaf Morning Take. The Leaf Morning.
You merged.
I merged the Athletic and Leafs Nation podcast together. See, I'm creating like the trifecta. And he said, like, if Toronto is looking to win this series, if they're gonna play on the outside, they have no chance. Because when you got good goaltending, they'll take the chances on the outside. Toronto is going to have to get into the slot. They're going to have to get into the dirty areas. And what's been kind of the talk all season long? Brought in Bertuzzi, you brought in Domi, Matthews. Where these guys have been going again,
Nice.
even Tavares.
Nice. A lot of Nice's goals. Nice's goals are coming from in that range, right? In that area.
They're not like this year. I'm really, really hoping too that they're going to take that mentality and bring it into the postseason. I know the Bruins are going to make it tough on them, but as you just said, the Bruins haven't exactly been excelling in that area as maybe they have done in past years. That blue line is not the same as it used to be, right? That to me that has to be the thing that Sheldon Keefe has to drive into these guys. Get to the middle of the ice, get to the dirty areas. And Claude Julien said, and I'm thinking of him saying this as if he was Sheldon Keefe. You are going to probably have to take some punishment, but it's going to be worth it when you come away with the better scoring chances and more goals than Boston in this series.
100%. That's exactly what they're going to have to make sure they do in order to get it done. I think the other thing that I guess worries me, so it's like offense definitely leans toward Toronto, goaltending leans toward the Boston Bruins, and defensive play. Look, the underlying numbers actually suggest that Toronto had the better overall team defensive play than the Boston Bruins, which was a bit surprising to me when I looked into that stat. When you think about the Boston Bruins, you think like, okay, this is a pretty well-structured team, but they kind of struggled a little bit this year. And we noted the amount of like high scoring chances and high danger chances that they've given up throughout the season. That said, in like the one-on-one matchups between the Leafs and Bruins this year, Boston led in mostly every single category. So will Toronto show up a little bit more come playoff time where it really matters now? Hopefully that is the case. Special teams also going to be a big time factor, but Toronto did have the better power play. Both teams slumping power plays heading into the playoffs. So I guess you could be happy about that. But the Bruins with the far more superior penalty kill at 82.5 this year, the Maple Leafs a middling 76.9%. And the last 4 games, I think it was just 64%, just 75% since the trade deadline. So the penalty kill has not been great either. That said, Marner was missing a lot of time during that stretch, and no Yarncroc either. And hopefully, both of those players can help round out this PK and be big parts of it. Dewars made a good addition there, and as you mentioned on yesterday's show, maybe the subtraction of TJ Brody on the PK could be a attraction by
Addition by subtraction.
yeah, it's it. Addition by subtraction was the phrase I was looking for there. All right, let's really quickly bring up the projected starting lines on both teams. Is it possible to get them both side by side? I don't even know if we can do that on here. Maybe not.
I can give it a try.
Old college try. We probably should have tried to see if we could have done this previously. Give it a go. But either way, I just want to do this because I think it'd be a really interesting kind of a whiteboard exercise where you match up everybody, lines 1 through 4, defensive pairings 1 through 3, and the goaltenders, and kind of see how things shake up between both of these two teams. All right. Hey, this works. Maybe we can just zoom in on, like, forget the players, the pictures, just zoom in on yeah, there we go. Maybe a little less there. All right. So for those who are watching on YouTube, you get the benefit of seeing firsthand how these teams stack up against one another. For those listening on the podcast, we're obviously going to explain what they look like. But at first glance, Dave, I like, this is always where what has given me a little bit more faith in the Maple Leafs kind of beating the Bruins. I don't know if upset is necessarily the right term here, but right off the bat, I do look at the depth up front that the Leafs have, and in particular down the middle. And that to me is going to be a big time factor in this series. Like, you look at Toronto, you've got Austin Matthews, John Tavares. Okay, Holmberg, yeah, can he get it done as this team's 3C? I don't know. We'll see. Potentially Yarncroc could come back and play that role too if he's healthy for game 1. As of now, he's still to be determined. And then David Kampf as your 4C. I mean, that is infinitely better than Zacha, Coyle, Morgan Geekie, and Jesper Boqvist that's going to be out there for the Bruins. Would you not say so?
Oh, without a doubt. See, the thing is, like, the Leafs have the better, I think, two-way ability. These guys can finish and they can defend. Like, don't sell yourself short on that regard. Like, the Bruins centers, they're all going to do one thing really well. They're going to play responsibly. They're going to be in good position. Like, Coyle, I have more faith that he's going to be a bit of a tough matchup because he's physical. I remember the games that the Leafs played against him. He gave them a little bit of trouble. But Bruins, we already know who the offensive guys you got to look out for. It's DeBrusk, it's Pasternak, it's Marchand. I'm not looking at the middle of the ice here, and I'm not seeing, how the Bruins could say, these guys can easily go toe-to-toe with the Leafs here. Maybe they'll try to, especially on home ice, get that Holmberg matchup. That might be where things get a little bit tough, and maybe Keefe will have to shuffle things around a little bit to make it work, maybe help Holmberg a little bit. Again, this is the lineup now. It could potentially change. Let's say if a Yarncroc comes back, he might slide in on that third line just to give it a more of a defensive punch. But again, like, I look at this forwards group and I'm like, I don't see how this version of the Bruins beat the Leafs 4 times this year. They did.
I know.
But, like, I look at it and I'm just like, I don't see how that happened. I mean, the Leafs didn't exactly do themselves a lot of favors in a lot of these games because they got down to. They were down early. They were playing catch up. I think again, that's where the Bruins want the
special teams and goaltending is the
right.
answer.
Yeah.
Special teams and good goaltending, because the Leafs power play was just 9% and their penalty kill was 70%, which means the Bruins penalty kill was 91% and their power play was 30%. So
Yeah.
that is the answer as to why the Bruins
Mhm.
won. It wasn't the 5-on-5 play, it was special
No, it
teams, and
wasn't.
that's going to be a big factor for this playoff series. Obviously, I think we can all agree with that. In terms of defensively, I mean, this is where I think you look and clearly the best two defenders in the series belong to the Boston Bruins, right? Like
Yeah.
Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy are, to me, the two best defenders in the series. That you can go Riley and you could take your pick. Like, is McCabe, better than Carlo possibly? And then it's kind of just jumbled up from there. But defensively, I don't think it's as like, yes, the star power's there with the McAvoy and Lindholm pairing, but in terms of like the six guy, like this Grizzly and Carlo pairing, I was taking a look at it on Natural Stat Trick. They got beat a lot. Like they gave up a lot of scoring chances, a lot of high danger chances, and Toronto. Hopefully, they could pick on that line. Like I think that's a real legitimate possibility for them. But I look at the Leafs blue line, and you know what I really like about if this does end up being this is our projected lineup,
Mhm.
which does have TJ Brody not in it. But you know what I like about these pairings, Dave? And I know we've talked about it before, but just to reiterate for those who may be new to the podcast, each pairing right now has someone who's physical and tough to play against in front of the net. It's going to make things a lot more difficult on the opposition, right? You've got Riley and Labushkin. Well, Bush, you can say what you want about his positioning lately, but in terms of being having snarl and being tough to play against, Labushkin is that. Both Benoit and McCabe are tough to play against, and you're going to pay a price if you want to go set up camp in front of the goaltender. And they've got Joel Edmondson, who we've seen him be a lumberjack in the playoffs. Think back to that bubble series against the Montreal Canadiens. He was a big part of that, shutting down Austin Matthews. So can he do the exact same thing this season for the Maple Leafs here as anchoring kind of a third pair there with Liljegren? I think he can. So I as much as there are concerns with this Maple Leafs lineup and defensively and what they're going to be able to do, at least when you look at identity, there is someone on each of those pairings that can that will, I guess, bring grit and bring toughness to that pairing. And hopefully that means that Boston won't have a lot of easy goals in front of the net this series.
Well, that's the thing, right? When I look at this at these D pairings, the Bruins obviously don't have as much skill when you go further down into the line. That top pair anchor is going to anchor a lot of time. Like I think they're averaging well over 23 minutes a game. You're going to see a lot of them. With
they
the Leafs
pick,
here,
especially if the Maple Leafs do, and I think we're both in a camp where if Domi returns for game one, you put him back up with the top line, and that's how we have the
1,000%.
forward lineup right now. And if that's the case, like, all right, well, Lindholm and McAvoy, well, who are you going to match up against, right? Like, they have last change, so they're going to have that decision. Do we put him out against Matthews, Bertuzzi, and Domi, or do we put him out against Marner, Tavares, and Matthew Nyes? Maybe Nylander slides up there, and then it becomes even more of a decision. Yes, they're going to play a lot, but that means that whichever forward grouping that doesn't have to play against McAvoy and Lindholm, we'll get a bit of an easier time out there, right?
Yeah, and correct me. I mean, Joel Edmondson, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he even played against the Bruins since maybe he may have played one game against them when the Leafs picked him up. I don't think he did. So that's a different look already there. Like I think Liljegren will appreciate having an Edmondson there. Because I don't remember. I'm trying to remember. I think Liljegren was probably paired with would it have been Brody?
Maybe Brody at
or Giordano. It might have even been Giordano for one of them too.
I don't know.
Because I remember when he got hurt. I think Gio was on the ice when he got hurt.
Maybe
on the Marchand play. So like
early in the season, yeah, it was.
Yeah. So I think that's already, in my opinion, an upgrade. Like I think Edmonds, like these guys are saving it for the playoffs. Like when you talk about how Maybe they didn't look their best. Like, they're not bringing the physical edge that maybe you like to see. But I think, again, they're saving it for the playoffs. The playoffs bring it out of players too, right? We had some issues, can Luke Shen be that guy with Morgan Riley? And he ended up doing it because the playoffs bring it out of you, right? And so that's where I have a lot of faith in a guy like Edmondson, like Benoit, McCabe. That's usually a pretty solid pairing for the Leafs. And so I think that the Leafs aren't going to rely on one pairing to get it done. I think that's going to bode well for them. Boston, again, as we said, it's going to be that one pairing that the Leafs are going to have to figure it out against.
Yep. And we're going to be joined by Ian McLaren of the Locked On Bruins. We're going to have a special bonus podcast tomorrow, a little crossover podcast with myself and Ian as we dive deep into both of these teams. So be ready to for that tomorrow. Be on the lookout for that tomorrow. On the other side, both of us have a different list. I've got, three most compelling storylines heading into the series between the Leafs and Bruins. And Dave has 5 guys facing the most pressure heading into this series. So 2 power rankings coming up on the other side. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's podcast is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told that I'm a fairly competitive person. You think that's true, Dave?
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. And I mean, I got a competitive side, but we all do, right? We all do. And my competitive side's a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you get to play not on one, but hundreds of different Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up these amazing cities that bring you big money. Here's the best part. You can mess around with your friends, Dave. You can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like in classic Monopoly. But now you can also heist their vaults for riches for yourself. And now the leaderboards will show you who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon out there. But it's not just for the competitive side. Look, you can team up with your friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or on Google Play. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morisuti with you. This is our Leafs Bruins round 1 preview show. And going into the series, I think there's a lot of big time storylines that we're keeping track of. And I think there's also, some guys who are facing a lot of pressure. So instead of both of us, I guess, doing each of these lists, I thought maybe we can both do our own separate lists and then just kind of talk about them. So I'm going to do 3 most compelling storylines that I'm, that I think are alive and well heading into the series. And then for you, you're going to do the 5 players facing the most, or 5 people, I should say, facing the most pressure heading into the series against the Boston Bruins. So we'll try and keep these rather quick as we're kind of, going a little over time. But as for the storylines, I mean, the biggest storyline for me, Dave, is obviously, can the big boys get it done? Right? Like so many times here, we're having the season-ending show and saying, boy, Marner and Matthews just didn't get it done once again, right? Tavares went silent. Morgan Riley didn't get it. Like, can the big boys finally get it done? Can they be the best players out on the ice and take over a series? They have the capability of doing so, right? Like, Matthews is a top, whatever you want to say, 2, 3, 4, 5 player on the planet. He is the best player out of anybody going to be playing in this series. He should look like it on a nightly basis. Mitch Marner, his partner in crime, at times has looked like a top 10 player in the National Hockey League. Can he do it? And when Marner's doing it, he does it on both sides of the ice, which is obviously very key for him to be defending, killing penalties, and then just dazzling out there, being the Marner magician he can be. I think those things need to show up in this series against Boston. And obviously, hopefully it continues throughout the entire playoffs. But I think the big boys are going to be the big story as per usual. Can they get it done? Another compelling storyline that I'm kind of looking at, Will the added toughness make a difference, Dave? Like we were told this summer that guys like Ryan Reeves, guys like Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, they were brought in to give this team some added toughness, to give them some snarl, some slot, to make them tougher to make them tougher to play against come playoff time. Well, we're here. Time to put your money where your mouth is, boys. Let's see if you can actually make the big difference, right? For years, we talked about how this team in Toronto was way too soft. And then they added a couple of pieces last year lower in the lineup. But this year, they've actually got some guys up in the top 6 who can play with that tough, heavy physical presence, with Bertuzzi, with Domi. So I'm excited to see what they can do. Hopefully, it does prove to be a bit of a difference maker and give them the edge they need to match up well here against the Big Bad Bruins, who also have kind of lost a bit of their toughness over the course of the last couple of seasons since they last met in the playoffs. Like Zdeno Chara is no longer there, right? Like Milan Lucic is not going to be out there. Like they've also lost a little bit of that size and toughness on their end. So should be interesting to see how that kind of translates throughout the playoffs here. And the last compelling storyline that I'm going to give you here, Dave, and you can touch on whichever one you think is interesting as well. Will the Leafs find a groove on the blue line? I think the blue line is going to be a massive thing to keep an eye on for the Maple Leafs throughout the duration of this series, just because we have no idea what this blue line is going to look like. I mean, they've got 8 capable defensemen who can be, in the lineup on any given night. What do the combinations look like? Do they succeed? I don't know. That is the big question. Then Sheldon Keefe is going to have to find out, but hopefully he can put together 3 pairings that work, that find a groove, that play well. We've seen it before. There was that little stretch when Morgan Riley was injured where, they were excellent. Like Timothy Liljegren looked great. TJ Brody looked awesome. Simon Benoit has had tremendous stretches throughout the season, that Benoit McCabe pairing. Can they continue to do that is the question. And can the other pairings get it done as well? I think their blue line is going to be a massive, massive storyline. And the bonus storyline, the number one is going to be special team success. That is the number one, the bonus storyline. But the actual most important one, can the Maple Leafs get it going on the power play, and can they figure it out on the PK, because I think special teams, you look back over the years, that has been a massive, massive Achilles heel for the Maple Leafs come playoff time. So to me, that has to be right for them. They have to win the special teams battle, or else I'm not sure they really have a chance in this series against the Boston Bruins. Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say for me, just listen to all that. The special teams are something I've always been wondering about, because you talk about why the Leafs haven't played well against the Bruins, not just this season, past playoff rounds. Special teams has been a big factor, and on top of that, this speaks to, and I go back to the interview we did with ODog, which is, it's not just about the core players. And Brad Treliving came in here and said that mentality needs to shift. You need all players to come and do more. But here's where I go into that. Special teams, it's not your core players there, other than Mitch Marner, right? You got your depth players, your role players, or that's where the other guys are going to get the more time on ice, right? The guys on the PK, can they, a Connor Dewar, David Kampf, are they going to be able to step up in those key moments? That to me is where I feel like you're going to win 16 games. And if you're going to hope that it's all going to rest on the big boys, again, I don't know. Like the team is built that they take a big load. I get that.
It, right? Like it's not that it's not that the big boys are going to be able to get it done alone. It is going to take the whole team. But if the bottom 6 is playing well and the top 6 is not, they don't stand a chance. They can get by if the big boys are the best players on the planet for a 2-month stretch and the middle 6 is average. Yeah, they'll win games. They'll win a lot of games. So right. Yes, of course, it takes everybody to get it done. In one night, it'll be the 4th line who maybe wins you a game. One night, it'll be the 3rd line. But in at least 80% of the games, you gotta make sure that it's your big boys. And I know how much he hates the core four term, he being Brad Treliving. But like it's those guys. We'll even make it the Fab Five if you want to add Morgan Riley in there. It's those players that are going to lead this team. Like if they don't get it done, team's got no shot, regardless of how good the bottom six is.
No, I agree on that. No, for sure.
Yeah, with all due respect, you wanted to abolish the core four mantra, but unfortunately, they're paid to be to lead this team. So, all right, I'm sure you'll talk about a couple of those guys in your pressure list. So let's get right to it, Dave. The 5 people in the Maple Leafs organization could be players, could be coaches, front office men, could be the mascot, could be one of us possibly. Who are the 5 guys who you think are facing the most pressure heading into this playoff series?
Well, we definitely have pressure now that we're at 5K subscribers. We gotta bring our A game. So there's some pressure on us, I will say. But we're gonna start with Austin Matthews at number 5. He went for this big chase for 70. He didn't get the 70. How much energy was spent on that? Is he able to now refocus, get himself reorganized, and now know he has to bring that mentality to the playoffs? I don't have an issue. I don't have fear that he's not able to do it, but it's going to be tough. This is going to be all eyes are going to be on him now, with everything that went on during the season. So I think there's going to be some pressure on him to score, and not only score, but be good defensively too. He's got to bring that two-way game that's made him a guy that should be in the Selke conversation when it's all said and done. I think that's important for him. Number 4 for me, I got Mitch Marner. Since he's come back from injury, I haven't been wowed by Marner. He's taken his shots at the media since he's been back. I want to see Mitch just lay it out on the ice. This is a guy who we're going to be talking about the next few off seasons with the contract talk. There is going to be pressure on him. There's always pressure on Mitch when it's playoff time, and he hasn't exactly brought the A game that we expect from him in the playoffs.
I got to tell you, I'm shocked that you have him so low on your list or higher in list, however you want to look at it. I can't wait to see how you came up with 3 other individuals who have more pressure than Mitch Marner.
Oh, you're going to be very intrigued.
Well, I think he was up at the top for me, but continue.
He was going to be 3, but initially I had him at 3, but I put Ilya Samsonov at 3.
Okay.
You don't have goaltending. You're not going far in the playoffs. This guy has a contract year. He's been through probably one of the hardest years of his career. He's bounced back. Last few games haven't been too good for him, and people are going to be talking about this goaltending going into this series, as a question mark because of these last few games, the impression that he kind of left. So there's a lot of pressure on Samsonov, especially because the defense, if they're not at their best, can he be the guy that can kind of prop them up, right? Especially given what's on the other side for the Bruins, right?
Yeah, I had a quick question for you. Okay, I'm gonna put a hypothetical scenario out there, right?
Okay.
Let's say it's 3-2, 3-2 in the third period. It's been a pretty back and forth game, and there's about 6 minutes left, and all of a sudden, Ilya Samsonov lets in an absolute muffin of a goal, a back-breaking goal. It's 4-2, and it's curtains. Leafs unable to come back. Does that bring Joseph Woll in for game 2, or does Samsonov have a bit longer of a leash than a 4-goal outing with one really bad goal? Or do you go back?
I think they'll go back to him for the second game. I think they will, but the leash is not going to be long.
Okay.
So the reason the leash might not be long is because the guy who I think has the second most pressure isn't a guy who is actually on the ice. He is behind the bench. That is Sheldon Keefe. We haven't talked too much about what this playoffs means for Sheldon Keefe and his job going forward, because he did get a contract extension, but it wasn't exactly one that I feel like gave him a lot of security if things don't go well moving forward. And I feel like he's coaching for his job these playoffs. A lot of people I talk to, they say if the Leafs don't do well against Boston, Keefe gone. A lot of people I talk to. So I think they're and he even knows the pressure's on him. He said during intermission against Tampa, he's preparing for Boston. He's watching video on Boston. Like
Yeah,
I think
cap.
no.
But anyway,
So I think there's a lot of like out of everyone there, I think there's a considerable amount of pressure because I think he knows another failed playoff, especially first round. I don't know how he lasts.
yeah. If it's ugly, I think if it's ugly, he's gone. I think if it's a compelling and it's an absolute dogfight, I'm not sure. I think I don't know. I thought he did a really good job this year, kind of navigating this season for the Maple Leafs between the issues at net, the injuries that they had, whether it was at goaltending, the back end, Marner's injury, trying to fit in these new pieces that were brought in. I thought that he's done a pretty solid job, to be honest with you, and one that I would think that the new general manager would be somewhat happy with. And I don't know about you, but it did seem like he coached differently this year. It seemed like he was a little more assertive and had, I don't know if you want to say, had more control over his team this season. I don't know how to really explain it, but it felt like it just felt different this year. And I don't know if that was because he had a new lease on life with a new general manager, because he had an extension, or to your point, because he said, this is my last kick at the can. If I don't get these guys going, I might be looking for new employment. So it is interesting. I agree with you. I think there is going to be significant pressure on Sheldon Keefe, though, regardless. Who's number one, Dave? Who's got the most pressure on them?
It's the guy right at the top, Brendan Shanahan. Brand new president of MLSE. I don't know if you read the article by Michael Grange.
Yeah.
That came out as Pelly came in. MLSE, yes, they print money. They make money whether the Leafs do well or the Leafs fail in the playoffs. But MLSE is not happy that the Leafs have not made it as far as they should have or believe they should have in this Brendan Shanahan era. And I think if you keep Sheldon Keefe around, let's say they lose out in the first round and Sheldon Keefe sticks around. The reason why I'm not as convinced about that, you got a president here who is going to want to set a tone. And I think Keith Pelly won't exactly be thrilled if the Leafs once again fail to move on. And Shanahan, look, he brought in a new GM. As soon as you bring in another general manager, that starts to get the talk going a little bit here about what his future is like. How many times can he make changes before somebody considers change at the very top?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's where, sure. and there's been a lot of talk about this new president, and he's coming in with this. I guarantee with an attitude that I'm going to make changes if things aren't going well, and Leafs fans are not going to accept a short playoff experience, and they're going to be calling for some change. There's not a lot of change you can make on the ice, but you can make the change up top. So when jobs are on the line, the pressure's at its highest.
Changes. Yes, absolutely. There are changes that could be made on the ice, and I don't want to get into that conversation, but there is a couple of players who are up for extension this summer. First round exit. Things will get noisy and loud about whether or not those players deserve the extensions, talking about Marner and John Tavares. But those are off-season conversations, and hopefully we don't have to have that chat for a couple of months now. Leafs, Bruins, round one, it's locked in. Puck drop tomorrow, 8 p.m. We only got one more order of business before we sign off here, Dave. Who wins the series? How many games?
I'm going Leafs in 6.
Oh, Leafs in 6. You got winning this in 6.
I can't see this going 7. I have PTSD from Game 7 in Boston. If this team goes to Game 7 in Boston, I might not be able to watch that game. I'm being honest with you. You might have to go and do this podcast without me if this goes to Game 7 in Boston.
Yeah, it does kind of have either Leafs in 6 or Boston in 7 kind of feel, right? That's
when O said Leafs in 7, I almost went that was tough to hear. I can't. People know Leafs and Boston and Game 7s against Toronto has not been a pretty history.
So on FanDuel, the Bruins are favored -120 to win the series. Leafs, You're getting even money on FanDuel to win the series. I'm with you though, Dave. I do think that the Maple Leafs win this series. I really, really do. I don't think enough people are talking about how Boston flamed out last year also. Like, people talk about how the Leafs choke all the time. The Bruins were the best team in hockey. They had the greatest regular season of all time, and then end up getting upset by the Florida Panthers and just completely buckled. I think they're up 3-1 and then lost 3 in a row to Florida. So, is that going to be is that demon going to be swirling in the heads of the Boston Bruins, and maybe that type of pressure could potentially hurt them, much how it hurt the Maple Leafs year after year of not winning around. But ultimately, I do think that the Maple Leafs actually are the better team. I look at the group on paper, and I think that Toronto is the better team. The goaltending scares me a little bit with Ullmark and Swayman, but if they're going to be going back to back with their goaltenders, that could kind of be a distraction for the goalies, which may bode well for Toronto. So, another reason to think that possibly this is the year that they exercise the demons, they get it done, they beat the Bruins, but you're gonna hate me, Dave. You're gonna hate me. I do think it goes 7. I think Leafs in 7. That fully would exercise the demons that is the Boston Bruins. If they can win a game 7 and put them away finally for the first time since 1950 freaking 9, Dave, boy, we'll be feeling really, really good on that postcast. So that's it. We both think the Leafs make it through. Dave likes them in 6. I like them in 7. You let us know down below. Leafs, Bruins, how many games? Let us know down below. Want to thank the O-Dog for joining us today. Appreciate it. But that'll do it for us on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Nikki_Canuck. Follow Dave at _Morrissey, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We are going to be putting out a bonus podcast tomorrow with Ian McLaren of Locked On Bruins. So be sure to keep an eye out for that as well. We'll go a little bit more in depth into this matchup with Ian. So that'll be a lot of fun. So that'll be coming out tomorrow, wherever you get your podcasts. And it'll also be up on YouTube. Until then, enjoy game 1, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hope that we are back here on Monday talking about a Maple Leafs victory. Puck drop 8 p.m. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.